There are times when only split-second decisions can save lives. For Hyojin Won, CEO of One Industries and heir to one of South Korea's largest technology conglomerates, that moment came at an exclusive dinner party in his own Manhattan penthouse when his personal chef, a woman he'd hired 3 months ago and barely noticed beyond her excellent cooking, switched his dinner plate with hers 2 seconds before he took a bite that would have killed him. The chef's name was Bernice Peterson. 32 years old, from New Orleans, trained at Le Cordon Bleu Paris, employed by Hyojin's household management company to prepare meals during a 6-month business expansion stay in New York. She was talented, professional, and completely invisible to him in the way that wealthy people often don't notice the staff who serve them. Until she saved his life by deliberately poisoning herself instead of him. What Hyojin didn't know, what nobody at that dinner party knew, was that Bernice Peterson wasn't really a chef. She was an undercover FBI agent who'd spent 8 months infiltrating his household because the FBI suspected One Industries was involved in industrial espionage, technology theft, and illegal weapons development that threatened national security. She'd been sent to gather evidence, document crimes, build a case that would take down Hyojin Won and his entire corporate empire. Instead, she'd just saved his life. And in doing so, completely destroyed her own mission. But let me start at the beginning, because this story is about loyalty, about the difference between who we think we are and who we become when tested, and about a woman who had to choose between her duty and the life of someone she was supposed to be investigating. Hyojin Won was 37 years old and had inherited One Industries at 32 when his father died suddenly of a heart attack. The company was a technology giant. Semiconductors, artificial intelligence, defense contracts, bleeding-edge research that pushed boundaries between innovation and danger. His father had built the company through brilliance and questionable ethics. Hyojin had inherited both the empire and the moral ambiguity. He was brilliant, MIT educated, fluent in 5 languages, capable of understanding complex technology that baffled even his senior engineers. But he was also isolated, suspicious, completely convinced that everyone wanted something from him. He'd never married. Had few real friends. Lived in a world where every relationship was transactional, every interaction was potentially compromised, every person was either useful or irrelevant. His life was work, more work, occasional obligatory social events, and returning to empty luxury apartments in whatever city his business required him to be in. He was successful, powerful, and profoundly lonely in ways he'd stopped acknowledging years ago. Which is why he barely noticed his personal chef beyond confirming that meals appeared on time and tasted excellent. She was staff. Invisible. Part of the household infrastructure he paid for but didn't think about. Bernice Peterson had been recruited by the FBI straight out of culinary school when an agent recognized that her combination of cooking skills and intelligence made her perfect for undercover household infiltration work. She'd spent 4 years working cases, embedding in wealthy households to gather evidence about financial fraud, political corruption, organized crime. She was excellent at the work. Could cook at Michelin star level while simultaneously planting surveillance devices, copying documents, gathering intelligence. Could be charming and forgettable at the same time, making herself essential to household operations while remaining completely invisible to the targets she was investigating. The One Industries case was her biggest assignment. The FBI believed Hyojin's company was stealing American military technology, selling it to foreign adversaries, and developing autonomous weapons systems that violated international treaties. They needed evidence to prove it, and that meant getting someone inside Hyojin's household for long-term surveillance. Bernice had been placed through a household management company that provided staffing for ultra-wealthy clients. She'd been cooking for Hyojin for 3 months, gradually gaining the trust of his household staff, planting bugs in his home office, copying files from his computer when he left it unlocked. She'd gathered substantial evidence. Emails discussing technology transfers. Financial records showing payments to sanctioned entities. Technical documents about weapons development that shouldn't exist outside classified government facilities. She was close to having everything the FBI needed to build a prosecutable case. And then she discovered the assassination plot. It happened by accident. She'd been in Hyojin's home office late at night, downloading files from his computer while he was asleep, when she'd noticed an email that didn't fit the pattern. It was from someone in his own company, his chief technology officer, a man named David Kim, discussing eliminating the succession problem during the upcoming dinner party. Bernice had opened the email thread. Read with growing horror as David Kim and two other executives discussed poisoning Hyojin during a dinner Bernice herself was supposed to cook. They'd bribed someone in Bernice's kitchen supply chain to lace one ingredient with a sophisticated poison, something that would cause what looked like a heart attack, untraceable once metabolized, perfect for making Hyojin's death appear natural. The executives wanted him dead so they could take control of one industries themselves. They'd been planning this for months, had identified the dinner party as the perfect opportunity because multiple witnesses would see Hyojin die of apparent natural causes with no suspicion of foul play. Bernice had stared at that email, her FBI training warring with basic human decency. Her mission was to gather evidence against Hyojin 1, not to protect him. If he died, her investigation would be complicated but not destroyed. She could potentially gather even more evidence during the power vacuum of succession. But letting someone be murdered, even someone she was investigating, wasn't something Bernice could reconcile with who she was beneath the FBI agent persona. So she'd made a decision that would change everything. She would protect Hyojin long enough to neutralize the assassination attempt, then figure out how to salvage her investigation afterward. The dinner party was scheduled for tonight. Bernice had 48 hours to identify which ingredient had been poisoned and how to prevent Hyojin from ingesting it without revealing that she knew about the plot. She'd spent those 48 hours systematically testing every ingredient in her kitchen, using basic chemical analysis tools she'd concealed among her cooking equipment. And she'd found it, the truffle oil. The expensive, rare truffle oil she was planning to use for the risotto, laced with a poison that would cause rapid cardiac arrest in anyone who consumed it. Bernice couldn't just throw out the oil. That would raise questions, possibly alert the conspirators that their plan had been discovered. She needed to let the assassination attempt proceed far enough to identify all the conspirators while ensuring Hyojin didn't actually die. So she'd done the only thing that made sense. She would swap his plate with hers at the last possible moment, ingest the poison herself, and trigger the emergency protocol she'd established with her FBI handlers. It was risky. The poison might kill her before medical help arrived. She'd be exposed as an FBI agent, ending her investigation. Hyojin would know she'd been undercover in his household. But he'd be alive. And the conspirators would be exposed. Bernice made the decision with the same calm she brought to complicated recipes: assess the ingredients, plan the steps, execute without hesitation. The dinner party arrived. 20 guests. One industry's executives, potential investors, business associates from various industries. Hyojin played the gracious host, charming in the performative way wealthy people learn to be charming, while clearly preferring to be working in his office. Bernice prepared the meal with extraordinary care. Every course was perfect. The risotto, laced with poisoned truffle oil, was prepared exactly as planned, plated beautifully, ready to be served. She'd marked Hyojin's plate with a tiny scratch on the rim that only she could see. That was the plate with the concentrated dose of poison, the one that would kill him within minutes. As servers brought the courses out, Bernice watched from the kitchen, her heart hammering, waiting for the moment she'd rehearsed in her mind dozens of times. Hyojin received his plate. Started to lift his fork. Bernice moved. She entered the dining room carrying a bottle of wine, professional and apologetic. Mr. 1, I'm so sorry, I noticed an imperfection in your plating. May I replace it with a fresh preparation? Before he could respond, she'd switched his plate with one she'd carried in, the identical dish she'd prepared for herself, minus the poison. Set the poison plate in front of her own place setting at the staff table in the adjacent room. Please, continue, she said to the confused guests. My apologies for the interruption. She returned to her position, sat at the staff table where household employees ate while monitoring the main dinner, and took a deliberate bite of the poisoned risotto. It tasted perfect. She'd always been proud of her risotto technique. 30 seconds later, her heart started racing. 60 seconds, her vision began to blur. 90 seconds, her chest felt like it was being crushed. She activated the emergency beacon hidden in her watch. A signal to her FBI handlers that she was in medical distress. Then she collapsed. The dinner party erupted in chaos. Hyojin was there instantly, kneeling beside her, his hands already checking her pulse while shouting for someone to call an ambulance. "What happened?" he demanded. "What's wrong?" "Poisoned," Bernice managed, her voice barely a whisper. "Your plate. Swapped it. Couldn't let you die." Hyojin went absolutely still. Then he was moving with terrifying efficiency, carrying her toward the door himself despite his security team's protests, shouting for his car, getting her to the hospital faster than any ambulance could. In the car, while Bernice struggled to breathe, to stay conscious, Hyojin held her and said something she'd never expected to hear from the cold, distant CEO she'd been investigating. "Don't you dare die. Do you understand me? You don't get to save my life and then die. Stay conscious. Stay with me." Bernice tried to respond but couldn't. The poison was shutting down her system faster than she'd anticipated. The last thing she heard before losing consciousness was Hyojin's voice, desperate in ways that sounded nothing like the controlled businessman she'd been observing for 3 months. "Please. I don't even know your name. Don't die before I can thank you properly." Then darkness. She woke up 36 hours later in a private hospital room with the best medical care money could buy, a FBI handler sitting in the corner looking stressed, and Hyojin one standing by her bedside looking like he hadn't slept since she'd collapsed. "You're awake," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion and something that might have been relief. "I'm alive," Bernice corrected, her throat raw from intubation. "Which means the antidote worked." "Barely. The doctor said another 5 minutes and we'd have lost you." Hyojin sat in the chair beside her bed like his legs had given out. "Why did you do it? Why poison yourself to save me?" "Because letting you be murdered wasn't acceptable. Even if you are a corporate criminal who steals military technology." The room went silent. Hyojin stared at her. The FBI handler in the corner looked like he wanted to disappear. "So you know," Hyojin said quietly. "You know what the FBI thinks I'm doing." "I'm the FBI. I've been investigating you for 3 months. Embedded in your household as a chef to gather evidence of industrial espionage and weapons development violations." Bernice forced herself to sit up despite the pain. "And I had almost everything I needed to arrest you when I discovered your executives were planning to poison you. So you saved the person you were supposed to be building a case against." "Yes." "Why?" "Because you're a person. Whatever crimes you may have committed, you don't deserve to be murdered by people you trust. I couldn't let that happen." Hyojin looked at her like she was the most confusing thing he'd ever encountered. "You destroyed your investigation to save me." "Yes. Which means I'm probably fired." Bernice glanced at her FBI handler, who nodded grimly. "And you're probably going to sue the FBI for unauthorized infiltration of your household. So we're both having a bad week." "The executives who planned this," Hyojin said, his voice going cold. "David Kim and whoever else was involved. I want their names. I can give you the emails. Complete conspiracy. They wanted you dead so they could control One Industries. Then give me everything. And in exchange I'll make you an offer." "What kind of offer?" "Don't work for the FBI anymore. Work for me. As my actual personal chef, not as an undercover agent. Cook for me, tell me honestly what you think about my life and my business, and help me figure out if I'm actually the criminal the FBI thinks I am." Bernice blinked. "That's the strangest job offer I've ever received. You saved my life at tremendous personal cost. I want to understand why. And I want to understand what the FBI thinks I've done, because some of what you said I genuinely don't recognize. If I'm running a criminal enterprise, I need to know. If I'm being framed or misunderstood, I need to prove that." He paused. "Either way, I need someone I can trust. And you've proven you're trustworthy by choosing my life over your mission. I'm an FBI agent who's been lying to you for 3 months. You're a person who poisoned yourself to save someone you were investigating. That's not deception, that's integrity." Hyojin's expression was intense. "Work for me. Help me figure out the truth. And maybe you'll gather enough evidence to know whether I deserve prosecution or protection." Bernice looked at her FBI handler, who just shrugged. She was off the case regardless, her cover was blown, the investigation was compromised. She looked at Hyojin, who'd sat by her hospital bed for 36 hours while she recovered from poisoning herself to save him. And she made another split-second decision that would change everything. "Okay. I'll work for you. As your personal chef and apparently your moral advisor. But I'm keeping FBI contacts, and if I find actual evidence of crimes, I'm turning it over to authorities." "Fair. And in exchange, I'll give you complete transparency about one industry's operations. Every contract, every development project, every business decision. You investigate from the inside instead of undercover. That's either the most brilliant or most stupid thing you've ever done. Probably both. But you saved my life. I owe you honesty at minimum." They shook hands. And in a New York hospital room, a FBI agent who'd gone undercover to investigate a suspected criminal ended up becoming his employee instead, with complete access to investigate him legitimately while cooking him dinner. It was the beginning of something neither of them understood yet, a partnership built on attempted murder, actual poisoning, and the strange trust that comes from someone choosing your life over their own mission. Subscribe to see what happens when an FBI agent becomes a chef for the man she was investigating and they both discover the truth is more complicated than either suspected. Comment where you're watching from and tell me, would you save someone you were supposed to be investigating? This story is just beginning. Bernice spent 3 weeks recovering from the poison before she was cleared to return to work. During that time, several things happened that fundamentally changed the situation. First, Hyojin had his entire security team replaced after discovering they'd failed to detect the poisoning plot. He hired new people who reported directly to him rather than through one industry's management. Second, the FBI formally ended Bernice's undercover assignment and offered her a choice: continue as a field agent on different cases, or resign from the bureau to pursue alternative career opportunities. It was their polite way of saying her cover was blown and she'd compromised an investigation by saving the target's life. Bernice chose to resign. Not because she regretted saving Hyojin, but because she'd realized during her recovery that 8 years of undercover work had left her exhausted with deception. She wanted to do something honest for once. Third, Hyojin had David Kim and the 2 other executives arrested. The evidence Bernice provided about the poisoning conspiracy was overwhelming, and all 3 confessed rather than face trial. They were currently in jail awaiting sentencing for attempted murder. And fourth, Hyojin had done something unexpected: he'd hired an independent forensic accounting firm to audit one industry's completely. Every contract, every financial transaction, every technical development project for the past 5 years. He wanted to know if his company was actually engaged in the illegal activities the FBI suspected. "You're really doing this," Bernice said during her first day back at work, standing in Hyojin's penthouse kitchen reviewing the accounting firm's preliminary findings. "Complete transparency. I promised you that. I don't break promises." Hyojin sat at the kitchen island, reviewing documents on his tablet while Bernice prepared dinner. Her first meal since recovering, a relatively simple roasted chicken with seasonal vegetables. "And honestly, I need to know. I've been running this company for 5 years, but I inherited structures and relationships from my father. If he built something illegal, I need to understand what I'm actually managing. What if the audit confirms the FBI's suspicions? What if you are running a criminal enterprise? Then I dismantle the illegal parts and face whatever consequences are appropriate. I'd rather know the truth than operate in ignorance." Bernice studied him while she worked. Hyojin 1 was different than she'd expected when she'd started this investigation. The FBI file had painted him as a ruthless tech CEO, probably aware of and actively involved in industrial espionage. Someone who'd knowingly stolen military technology and sold it to enemies. But 3 months of observation plus these 3 weeks of actual conversation had revealed someone more complicated. He was driven, absolutely. Brilliant and somewhat arrogant about his intelligence. But he wasn't cruel or deliberately criminal. He genuinely seemed not to know if his company was engaged in illegal activities. Which meant either he was an excellent liar, or he'd inherited a criminal enterprise without realizing it. The audit is going to take months, Bernice said, pulling the chicken from the oven. What do we do in the meantime? You cook. I work. We have conversations where you tell me honestly what you think about my business decisions, and I try to understand where the line is between aggressive capitalism and actual crime. That's not a normal employer-employee relationship. Nothing about our relationship is normal. You were an undercover FBI agent who poisoned yourself to save me. Normal stopped being relevant a long time ago. He wasn't wrong. They fell into a strange routine over the following weeks. Bernice cooked 3 meals a day, continued living in the staff apartment in Hyunjin's building, maintained the basic structure of being a personal chef. But she also attended his business meetings, reviewed contracts when he asked for her perspective, offered opinions about whether specific deals seemed ethical. Hyunjin had given her complete access to one industry's operations, not as an employee, but as an outside observer whose judgment he'd decided to trust because she'd proven she valued human life over mission objectives. It was bizarre. And increasingly effective. This contract, Bernice said during one meeting, reviewing a proposed deal with a Chinese technology firm. It's structured to transfer semiconductor designs that look like they could be dual-use, civilian applications but also potential military applications. That's most advanced semiconductor technology, Hyunjin replied. Everything has dual-use potential. But this contract doesn't have the export restrictions that U.S. law requires for potential military technology. Which means you'd be illegally transferring controlled technology to a foreign entity. Hyunjin went still. Pulled up the contract on his computer, reviewed the sections Bernice had flagged. You're right. This violates export controls. How did this get approved? He called in his chief compliance officer, demanded an explanation. The officer stammered something about the contract being reviewed by the legal team and approved through normal channels. Then our normal channels are broken, Hyunjin said coldly. This deal is cancelled immediately. And I want a complete review of every international contract we've signed in the past 2 years to identify any other export control violations. He turned to Bernice after the compliance officer left. Thank you. I would have signed that without the flagging. Would have committed a federal crime without realizing it. That's what I'm here for apparently. Being your criminal activity detector while also cooking you dinner. You're good at both. They were also developing something that felt dangerously like friendship. Late-night conversations over wine after business meetings. Discussions about their very different childhoods, his in Korean wealth and privilege, hers in New Orleans working-class struggle. Debates about ethics, about the difference between legal and right, about whether someone could inherit a criminal enterprise and transform it without being culpable for its past. Do you think I'm a bad person? Hyunjin asked one evening. They were on his penthouse terrace overlooking Manhattan, Bernice having just finished serving dinner for a small business meeting that had ended early. I think you're a person who inherited a complicated empire and has been trying to manage it without fully understanding what you inherited, Bernice replied honestly. I don't think you're deliberately criminal. But I think your father might have been, and you've been operating systems he built without questioning them. Is that worse or better than knowing you're criminal and doing it anyway? Better. Because it means you can choose differently once you understand what you're actually doing. And if the audit proves my father built this company on illegal activities? If everything I've accomplished is based on crimes I didn't know about but benefited from? Then you dismantle the illegal parts and rebuild on legal foundations. It'll be expensive and difficult, but it's possible. Hyunjin was quiet for a long moment. You're very certain I can change course? Very optimistic about my capacity for ethics despite the FBI spending months investigating me for crimes. I'm certain you poisoned yourself to save my life despite it destroying your investigation. If someone's capable of that, they're capable of choosing ethics over profit. You didn't poison yourself. I did. You would have done the same if positions were reversed. Maybe. Or maybe I would have let you die and preserved my investigation. Bernice looked at him seriously. No. You wouldn't have. You sat by my hospital bed for 36 hours. You replaced your entire security team because they failed to protect me. You're not someone who sacrifices people for convenience. How do you know? Because I've been observing you for months. First as an FBI agent, now as your employee. I know how you treat your staff, how you react when people need help, how you make decisions. You're not cruel. You're just isolated and suspicious because your wealth makes everyone transactional. Is that your professional FBI assessment? That's my personal observation as someone who's seen you at your worst and your best. Something shifted in Hyojin's expression. Bernice, I need to ask you something. What? Why did you really save me? And don't give me the professional ethics answer. The real reason. Bernice considered this. She'd been asking herself the same question for weeks. Because you didn't deserve to die, she said finally. Because the people planning to kill you were doing it for greed, not justice. Because. She hesitated. Because in 3 months of watching you, I'd started to see you as a person rather than a target. And I couldn't let someone I'd started to care about be murdered, regardless of what crimes I thought you might have committed. You cared about me. Even while investigating me. Yes. Which probably makes me a terrible FBI agent. But I've never been good at maintaining appropriate professional distance. Hyojin moved closer. I'm glad you're terrible at professional distance. Because you saved my life through personal connection rather than professional obligation. Are we having a moment? Because this feels like a moment. We're definitely having a moment. Probably inappropriate given I was investigating you 3 months ago. Extremely inappropriate. Also inevitable. He paused. Bernice, His phone rang. The special tone he'd assigned to his new head of security, which meant important, possibly urgent. Hyojin answered. Listened. His expression went from intimate to coldly professional in seconds. When? How many? Is the building secure? He was already moving toward his office. Lock down everything. I'm activating emergency protocols now. He hung up, turned to Bernice. Someone just attempted to break into One Industries headquarters in Seoul. Professional team, sophisticated equipment. They were trying to access our AI research division. Industrial espionage? Maybe. Or retaliation from whoever was working with David Kim. Either way, this wasn't random. He pulled up security feeds on his computer. I need to go to Seoul. Tonight. Deal with this personally. I'm coming with you. Bernice, you're my chef, not my security. I'm your criminal activity detector, remember? If this is connected to whatever illegal activities your father built, you need someone who thinks like an investigator. That's me. It could be dangerous. I literally poisoned myself 3 weeks ago. Dangerous is apparently my new normal. Hyojin looked like he wanted to argue. Then he smiled, a real smile, not the performative one he used with business associates. Fine. Pack for a week. We leave in 3 hours. I can pack in 30 minutes. Then use the extra 2.5 hours to research One Industries' Seoul operations. Because you're right, I need someone who thinks like an investigator. And apparently that's you now. They flew to Seoul on Hyojin's private jet, spent the flight reviewing security footage of the attempted break-in and analyzing what the intruders had been trying to access. They knew exactly where the AI research division was, Bernice said, studying the footage. Went straight to it, bypassed other areas that would have had valuable equipment or data. They wanted something specific. The AI division is working on autonomous systems. Drones, defensive networks, predictive algorithms. Most of it is legitimate commercial technology, but some has obvious military applications. Which means it's exactly what the FBI suspected you of developing. Weapons systems disguised as commercial AI. Except I don't know if any of it actually crosses that line. My father set up the division. I've been funding it but not deeply involved in the technical details. Then we need to find out exactly what they're developing. Because if this break-in was someone trying to steal military technology, that suggests you have military technology to steal. They landed in Seoul at dawn. Went directly to One Industries headquarters, a gleaming glass and steel tower in Gangnam that screamed technological innovation and wealth. Hyunjin's security team met them, briefed them on the break-in details. The intruders had been caught before accessing any systems, but their equipment suggested nation-state-level capabilities. This wasn't corporate espionage, this was government intelligence operation. Which government? Hyunjin asked. Unknown. They're not talking. Korean National Intelligence Service has them in custody now. Hyunjin turned to Bernice. This is bigger than I thought. If a foreign government is trying to steal our technology, that means we have something valuable enough to justify this kind of operation. Or it means they think you have something valuable. Perception matters as much as reality in intelligence operations. They spent the day reviewing the AI division's work. And what they found was simultaneously fascinating and terrifying. One Industries had developed autonomous defense systems that were absolutely military-grade. Drones that could identify and neutralize threats without human oversight. Predictive algorithms that could model combat scenarios and recommend tactical responses. AI systems that were clearly designed for warfare despite being labeled as security applications. This is what the FBI was looking for, Bernice said, reviewing the technical specifications. This is military weapons development disguised as commercial security products. But I didn't authorize this, Hyunjin said, his voice tight. These projects are listed as civilian security research. I approved funding for commercial applications, not weapons systems. Then someone in your company has been running a weapons development program without your knowledge. Using your funding and your company's infrastructure to build military technology and presumably sell it to whoever pays. My father. Probably. Or people he hired who've been continuing his work after his death. Hyunjin looked at the AI systems with something like horror. I've been funding weapons development for 5 years without knowing it. The FBI was right to investigate me. The FBI was right that One Industries is developing weapons. They were wrong about whether you knew and were directing it. Bernice reviewed the project files. These were all initiated before your father died. You've been continuing them because they were presented as legitimate security research. That doesn't make me less culpable. I should have investigated more carefully. Should have understood what I was actually funding. You're right. But you didn't know, and now you do. The question is what you do with that knowledge. Hyunjin was quiet for a long moment, clearly processing. I shut it all down. Every military application project. I transition the civilian security work to fully legal applications. And I cooperate with any government investigation into how this technology was developed and who it was sold to. That'll cost you billions. These projects probably generate significant revenue. I don't care. I won't run a weapons company. I won't be the person who develops technology that kills people for profit. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling my legal team and the compliance office. We're implementing immediate shutdown of all questionable projects. Hyunjin, wait. If you shut down everything immediately, it tips off whoever's been running the illegal program. They'll destroy evidence, hide their activities. You need to preserve everything first for investigation. You're right. So what do I do? You let me investigate. Properly, this time. Not undercover, but with your full authorization. I identify everyone involved in the illegal weapons development, I document everything, I build a case. Then you shut it down and turn the evidence over to appropriate authorities. You do that? Investigate my company formally? Even though it might prove I'm criminally liable? I'd do that because you deserve to know the truth. And because if your company has been developing illegal weapons, that needs to be stopped regardless of the consequences to you personally. Hyunjin looked at her with something like wonder. You're really willing to investigate me honestly? Even if it destroys me? Yes. Because you asked me to help you understand the truth. That's what I'm doing. Then do it. Full investigation, complete access, whatever you need. Find out what my father built and who's been continuing it. And just like that, Bernice Peterson, former FBI agent, current personal chef. Became the lead investigator into one industry's weapons development program, with complete authority from the CEO she'd once been investigating undercover. It was possibly the strangest career development she'd ever experienced. But it was also necessary. Because someone had been developing weapons using Hyogen's company without his knowledge. And that person, or those people, needed to be exposed before they did more damage. The investigation had just begun. And Bernice had a feeling it was going to reveal things that neither she nor Hyogen were prepared to handle. The investigation took 6 weeks and revealed a conspiracy more extensive than either Bernice or Hyogen had anticipated. Bernice worked with the independent forensic accounting firm Hyogen had hired, cross-referencing their financial findings with the technical documentation of the AI division's projects. She interviewed employees, reviewed emails, tracked money flows, and gradually pieced together a picture of systematic corruption. Hyogen's father hadn't just built a weapons development program. He'd built an entire shadow company within One Industries, a network of executives, engineers, and administrators who were developing military technology and selling it to foreign governments without proper oversight or legal authorization. The shadow company had continued operating after the father's death because Hyogen had been too focused on the legitimate business operations to notice what was happening in divisions he'd assumed were running routine research. "Look at this," Bernice said during one late-night review session in Hyogen's sole office. They'd been working 18-hour days for weeks, surviving on coffee and takeout and shared determination to understand the full scope of what they were uncovering. "Your chief technology officer, he's been routing funds to shell companies that then purchase equipment for military applications. The equipment never appears in One Industries' inventory because it's being shipped directly to customers in countries under U.S. arms embargoes." Who are the customers? Saudi Arabia, UAE, some concerning transactions that might be routing to Iran through intermediaries. Countries that aren't supposed to have access to this technology. Hyogen looked physically ill. "I've been selling weapons to human rights violators without knowing it. Your company has been. You personally were ignorant of it. There's a legal distinction. That doesn't make me feel less responsible. It shouldn't. But it does mean you have options other than prison if you handle this correctly." They'd been consulting with lawyers throughout the investigation. Not One Industries' corporate counsel who might be compromised, but independent attorneys specializing in corporate criminal defense and government investigations. The legal advice was consistent: if Hyogen self-reported the illegal weapons sales to the U.S. Department of Justice and cooperated fully with investigation, he could potentially avoid personal criminal charges while the company faced civil penalties and the actually guilty executives faced prosecution. But it would require Hyogen to essentially destroy his own company, exposing crimes that would tank One Industries' stock price, terminate dozens of lucrative contracts, and potentially bankrupt the business his family had built over 2 generations. "I'm doing it anyway," Hyogen said after the lawyers laid out the risks. "I'm not protecting criminals just because they work for my company. I'm not valuing profit over accountability." "This will cost you everything," Bernice warned. "Your company, your reputation, possibly your freedom if prosecutors decide you should have known what was happening." "I know. But it's the right thing to do. You taught me that when you poisoned yourself to save me. Sometimes doing what's right costs everything." "I didn't teach you that. You already knew it. You just needed permission to act on it." They were sitting in Hyogen's office at 2 a.m., both exhausted, surrounded by documents that proved his company had committed serious crimes. Outside, Seoul's light sparkled against the darkness, oblivious to the fact that one of its most prominent companies was about to implode. "Bernice," Hyogen said quietly. "I need to tell you something." "What?" "I'm in love with you." She went absolutely still. "What?" "I'm in love with you. I have been since you woke up in that hospital and told me you'd poisoned yourself to save me. Maybe before that, when you were just my chef and I didn't realize I was noticing how you moved through my kitchen or how you talked to my staff with genuine respect. But definitely since you've been helping me investigate my own company despite it potentially destroying both of us." Bernice felt her heart hammering. "Hyogen, we can't." "I know. The timing is terrible. I'm about to blow up my own company and possibly face criminal charges." You're investigating me. Everything about this is inappropriate. So why are you telling me now? Because I've learned that waiting for the right moment means never saying what matters. Because you deserve to know how I feel before everything implodes. Because. He moved closer. Because you're the first person in my entire life who's been completely honest with me. Who cares more about truth than about my money or my company or what I can do for them? And I love you for that. I was undercover in your household lying to you for 3 months. And then you poisoned yourself to save me and spent the next 2 months helping me understand my own company's crimes despite it potentially destroying your investigation. The lying was your job. The truth is who you are. Bernice felt tears burning. I love you too. Which is completely inappropriate and terrible timing and probably going to make everything more complicated. Probably. Do you care? Not even a little bit. They kissed. It was desperate and intense and tasted like coffee and exhaustion and two people who'd been fighting their feelings for months finally admitting defeat. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Bernice laughed. We are spectacularly bad at professional boundaries. We're excellent at honest connection. Professional boundaries are overrated. Hyojin pulled her closer. When this is over, when we've reported everything and faced whatever consequences are coming, will you stay? Not as my chef or my investigator, but as yourself? As the person I want to build a life with? Ask me again when we're not facing potential criminal prosecution and corporate destruction. I'm asking now because I need you to know it's not the crisis talking. It's me, choosing you, regardless of what happens to One Industries or my wealth or my freedom. Then yes. When this is over, I'll stay. We'll figure out what comes next together. They spent that night working through the final evidence compilation, drinking terrible office coffee, periodically kissing when the stress got overwhelming, and preparing to destroy Hyojin's company to expose the crimes it had committed. By dawn, they had everything. Complete documentation of the illegal weapons sales, financial records showing money laundering, emails proving conspiracy, technical specifications of the military technology that had been developed and sold without authorization. Hyojin called his lawyers, initiated the self-reporting process to the Department of Justice, and triggered the corporate implosion that would define his life. The news broke within hours. One Industries' stock price collapsed. Customers terminated contracts. Employees began resigning. The South Korean government opened its own investigation. The U.S. Department of Justice announced a major international arms trafficking investigation. It was catastrophic. And absolutely necessary. Bernice watched Hyojin handle the crisis with grace that surprised her. He wasn't defensive, wasn't trying to minimize or excuse. He held a press conference where he acknowledged that his company had been engaged in illegal weapons development and sales without his knowledge, that he was cooperating fully with investigations, and that he took responsibility for failing to detect the crimes happening in his own organization. I inherited a company from my father without understanding everything I was inheriting, he said during the press conference. That ignorance doesn't excuse my responsibility to understand what my company was doing. I failed in that responsibility, and I'm accepting the consequences. The consequences came fast. Criminal charges against the executives who'd been running the shadow weapons company. Civil penalties against One Industries totaling billions of dollars. Personal lawsuits against Hyojin for negligent oversight. Within 3 months, One Industries was bankrupt. The company that had been worth tens of billions was liquidated to pay fines and victim compensation. Hyojin's personal wealth, which had been substantial, was reduced to basically nothing after legal fees and settlements. He went from billionaire CEO to unemployed former executive with a complicated legal situation and uncertain future. But he also went from isolated, suspicious man surrounded by people who wanted things from him to someone with actual relationships built on honesty. How are you holding up? Bernice asked one evening 6 months after the implosion. They were in a modest apartment Hyojin had rented, nothing like the penthouse he'd owned, but comfortable. Bernice had made dinner, something simple and comforting, while Hyojin reviewed job applications because he needed to actually work now that he wasn't wealthy. I'm okay, actually, Hyojin said, sounding surprised. I lost everything. my company, my wealth, my reputation. But I also lost the isolation and the constant suspicion and the weight of managing an empire I never wanted. Any regrets? About reporting the crimes? No. About not investigating my company more carefully sooner? Every day. He paused. But not about you. Never about you. Good. Because you're stuck with me now. Promise? Promise. They'd been living together for 3 months, figuring out what relationship looked like when neither of them had jobs or wealth or any of the structures that had previously defined their lives. Bernice had left the FBI permanently. Hyojin had left One Industries. They were both starting over. It was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. I got a job offer, Hyojin said during dinner. Yeah? Doing what? Corporate ethics consulting. Helping companies identify potential illegal activities in their operations before they become crimes. The firm specifically wants someone with experience discovering corporate corruption from the inside. That's perfect for you. It pays a fraction of what I used to make. But it's meaningful work. Actually helping prevent the kind of crimes my company committed. Are you taking it? If you think I should. You're my ethics advisor, after all. Bernice smiled. I think you should do work that matters to you instead of work that makes you wealthy. You've been wealthy. It made you miserable. It did. Mostly because I was wealthy and alone. He reached across the table, took her hand. Now I'm broke and happy. That's an improvement. You're not broke. You're financially constrained. There's a difference. Fair. And you? Any job prospects? Actually, yes. The FBI offered me a consultant position. Helping train undercover agents, reviewing active operations for ethical concerns, serving as an outside perspective on investigative methods. You'd work for the FBI again? Not as an agent. As someone who helps them do the work better, more ethically. I can make sure they don't burn agents the way they almost burned me. That sounds meaningful. It does. But it's also in DC, which means relocating if I take it. Then we relocate. I can do ethics consulting from anywhere. You'd move to DC for my job? I'd move anywhere for you. You saved my life, helped me expose my own company's crimes, and chose me when you could have chosen your FBI career. I'm not letting geography separate us. Bernice felt emotion tighten her throat. I love you. Even though you make terrible financial decisions like reporting your own company's crimes and you used to be a billionaire, which is intimidating. I love you too. Even though you poisoned yourself, which was terrifying, and you used to be an FBI agent, which is also intimidating. We're both intimidating people who made questionable decisions. That's our thing apparently. Our thing is honesty and choosing what's right over what's easy. Everything else is details. They moved to DC 3 months later. Bernice took the FBI consultant position. Hyojin built a successful ethics consulting practice. They got married in a small ceremony with a handful of friends, no family drama, nothing extravagant. Just 2 people who'd found each other through attempted murder, actual poisoning, and mutual commitment to truth over convenience. 5 years later, they were thriving. Hyojin's consulting firm was successful enough that they were financially secure. Bernice's work with the FBI had reformed several investigative practices and prevented multiple ethical violations. They had a good life. And they'd just found out Bernice was pregnant. We're having a baby, Hyojin said, staring at the pregnancy test like it might be a sophisticated prank. We're having a baby, Bernice confirmed. Which is terrifying because I have no idea how to be a parent. Neither do I. My father was terrible at parenting. I have no positive model. Then we'll figure it out together. Like everything else. By making it up as we go and hoping for the best? Exactly. It's worked so far. Hyojin pulled her close, his hand on her still flat stomach, his expression a mixture of terror and joy. I love you. Thank you for saving my life, for helping me become someone worth being, for choosing me repeatedly when you could have chosen easier paths. Thank you for letting me investigate you, for choosing honesty over wealth, for being willing to lose everything to do what's right. They stood in their DC apartment, both nervous about impending parenthood, both grateful for the strange path that had brought them together. From attempted assassination to actual poisoning to corporate implosion to this moment, expecting their first child, building a life together, proving that sometimes the most important relationships begin with someone choosing your life over their mission. Our kid is going to have a weird origin story, Bernice said. Our kid is going to know that their parents met when I was almost murdered and their mother poisoned herself to save me. That's definitely unique. Should we tell them that when they're old enough? Absolutely. They should know that love sometimes means sacrifice, that doing what's right costs everything, and that the best relationships are built on choosing each other repeatedly even when it's difficult. That's going to be one hell of a bedtime story. But an honest one. And honesty is our thing. Their daughter was born 8 months later, healthy and perfect. They named her Grace, because grace was what they'd both received when they'd chosen truth over convenience, when they'd chosen each other over easier options, when they'd built something real from the ruins of attempted murder and corporate fraud. And every night, when they put Grace to bed, they told her stories. Not fairy tales about princes and princesses, but real stories about choices and consequences and the importance of choosing what's right even when it costs everything. Stories about a chef who'd poisoned herself to save someone she was investigating. About a CEO who destroyed his own company to expose its crimes. About two people who'd found love in the most unlikely circumstances by choosing honesty over deception, integrity over wealth, each other over everything else. Those were the stories that mattered. The ones about transformation, about becoming better than circumstances demanded, about building something meaningful from the ruins of what came before. And Grace listened, understanding even as a child that her parents had given her something more valuable than wealth or status or easy comfort. They'd given her the example of choosing what's right, regardless of cost. Of building relationships on honesty instead of convenience. Of loving someone enough to sacrifice everything for them. That was the real legacy. Not money or companies or reputation. Just two people who'd chosen each other, chosen truth, chosen to become better than they'd been, and who were now teaching their daughter to make the same choices. The poison had saved a life. The honesty had built a future. And the love had created something that would last beyond both of them. That was enough. More than enough. Everything. Sometimes the most important choices happen in split seconds. Not after careful deliberation or strategic planning, but in moments when you have to decide instantly between following orders and following your conscience. Bernice Peterson was sent to investigate a suspected criminal. Instead, she saved his life by poisoning herself, destroying her mission but preserving her integrity. She chose a person's life over her professional obligation. And that choice revealed who she really was beneath the FBI agent persona. Hyojin 1 inherited a company without understanding the crimes it was committing. When he discovered the truth, he chose to destroy his own empire rather than profit from illegal weapons sales. He chose accountability over wealth, and that choice revealed the person he was capable of becoming. Together, they proved that integrity matters more than success, that honesty builds stronger foundations than deception, and that love rooted in mutual respect and shared values creates something far more valuable than money or power ever could. They demonstrated that transformation is always possible when we're willing to sacrifice what's comfortable for what's right. That becoming better requires destroying what we were. That the most meaningful relationships are built not in perfect circumstances but in the crucible of difficult choices. Most importantly, they showed that who we are isn't determined by what we inherit or what we're trained to do. It's determined by what we choose when tested, by whether we value human life over mission objectives, truth over profit, integrity over convenience. If you love this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about unlikely partnerships and the transformative power of choosing what's right over what's easy. Comment below, have you ever had to choose between following orders and doing what you knew was right? What did you choose? Let me know, I love hearing your stories. Thanks for watching, and remember, the most important choices often happen in seconds. In those moments, who we really are gets revealed. Make sure what you reveal is someone you can respect. Until next time.